All right, what's up, everybody? Now, everybody know by now, Dr. Cologne is coming out with a documentary on the fictitious Latin breakdown. And we're definitely going to get into that in a minute. But first of all, I want to take a moment to talk about the aftermath of the debate we had on March 23rd. Now, it's easy to tell who won this debate. All you got to look at who was the person putting out videos after videos trying to redeem himself. It certainly wasn't me. And so I want to focus on one of those videos, and we're going to highlight some things about it that he was incorrect about. Now, this is the video, one of the videos that he put out to try to discredit Tyreek and myself about the Latin breakdown, or the non-existence of the Latin breakdown. And so he tries to use my brother here, Jimmy Castor, to try to show that there is a Latin influence. Now, just because he's inspired by Latin music, and like I said in the debate, he's the only one from New York. So clearly he was exposed to Latin music. I stand by what I said before. The other percussionists were not. But just because, this is important to understand, just because you put some kind of Latin flavor in your music does not define a genre. His music is still listed as funk and soul. So again, I have to stress this. Nothing about Latin culture went into the creation of gospel, blues, funk, soul, neo soul, house, disco. Latin culture had zip to do with that. And I stand by that. Apparently, Dr. Cologne believes the moment you introduce a quote unquote Latin instrument, in his mind, the timbales is a Latin instrument. The moment you introduce that instrument, it becomes a Latin breakdown. Now, let's understand what breakdown is. Here's a simple explanation or definition of a breakdown. A breakdown is a section of a song in which several instruments have a solo parts. In music, breakdowns are used for slowing down the theme, building tension, adding variety, and returning to the main verse or chorus in a climactic way. Now, when you guys get an opportunity, go listen to this song. It's Just Begun by Jimmy Castor, all right? And you will notice the actual breakdown takes place around the 2-minute, 10-second mark of the video. And then through the course of that minute, you have an introduction of the guitar, you have the introduction of vocals, you have the introduction of bass, and it's not until little over a minute, like 3:18 in the video, you'll hear the timbales. Now, why would you call that a Latin breakdown when you only hear the timbales for a few seconds, yet there were other instruments that preceded it? Like, for example, why can't we call that breakdown the Jimi Hendrix breakdown when the guitar comes in? I mean, you get my point. The idea that you would focus purely on one instrument and then define that whole breakdown as a Latin breakdown is totally crazy. But this is what a desperate people do. They're reaching for something. And this is evidence of that. If I'm not mistaken, Dr. Cologne put out about 5 to 6 videos to try to redeem himself. Now think about what topics or subjects he did not put videos about. And that tells you who won this debate. He did not contradict the drumming history in America. Cologne contends that there were no drums. We had lost our Africanism the moment we came to America. Remember that? He did not prove that James Brown was influenced by Latin culture. He did not show that the descarga featured the percussive instruments only. He did not debunk the Black Power movement, the Black liberation and Black arts movements, and their effects on Black nationalism, identity, pride, and culture. These were very strong points on my behalf. He offered nothing to rebut that. Yet he just offered that this thing came from Cuba. Total nonsense. Well, I guess timing is everything. I had intentions for a while to do a critique on this Latin breakdown documentary promo, but it wasn't high on my priority. But as luck would have it, this is the right time. As we all know, March 23rd, me and Dr. Cologne had a debate, and his whole narrative has been undermined severely. Now, I got to be honest with you. I don't know how he could put out a documentary now, given that we definitely prove that there is no such thing as the Latin breakdown. Now, these are the two geniuses that came up with this fictitious term. And they only came up with this term in order to crowbar their way into Black culture and make themselves part of the origin story of hip hop. And there's been subsequent videos that came out that clearly bruised, attacked, undermined this whole notion of a Latin breakdown. So I think he's supposed to come out with this video sometime. I thought he said during the spring, but I think he's going to wait till Tyreek comes out with his video. He would be best served to leave it on the shelf because he's only going to embarrass himself. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to critique a little bit of this video. I'm going to focus on just 3 of the individuals that Cologne features in this video. It's going to be Rand Lies. It's going to be Silos Kungas, and it's going to be Felipe Luciano. Now, the other individuals, I don't know enough about them and whether or not they were misled in any way to do this video, so I'm going to leave them alone. I think these 3 are sufficient. So with that being said, let's get into it.
Certain sound and a certain movement to that sound. This goes back to the plena, goes back to the bomba, goes back to danza. I'm saying, go back to palenque, go back to all these Latin, these Afro-Latin, Afro-Caribbean movements.
Now let me tell you what I think about his commentary. Enough said.
Way you could be brought up in those 5 boroughs, walk in the 70s, 60s and 70s, walk around the street and not run into somebody playing congas in the street.
Now he appears to be offering this statement to show that these sounds were so influential in hip hop. So let's test that.
Okay. And we were together every day, like brothers, you know what I mean? Dressed, everything, you know what I mean? And he would always catch flack from Puerto Ricans for being with me, you know what I mean? And he'd knock them the fuck out, you know what I mean? But, so when in like 78, 79, the more Latinos started migrating toward hip hop, you know what I mean, and dancing as b-boys and stuff, they kind of changed the whole fabric of the breakdancing thing as b-boys, but it was a gradual thing as far as Puerto Ricans getting involved into hip hop. Puerto Rico was playing congas and timbales in the park while we was playing turntables. All right, so
what does that tell you? Was it truly that influential? Next. Now, I got to be honest. I was surprised when I saw that Felipe Luciano decided to take part in this documentary. And see, this is what happens when Puerto Rican pride gets in the way. Now, he know good and hell that Puerto Ricans had nothing to do with the creation of hip hop. But he gonna talk some craziness anyway.
Puerto Ricans are not guests in the house of anybody. Certainly not in the house of hip hop. We were there from the beginning. We helped develop it. We formulated it in some cases.
God only knows what he's going to say in the documentary. But let me remind everybody what Felipe has said probably 40 years ago.
While the 50s was the era of the big bands, the 60s was the era of Latin Boogaloo, the era that most of us became interested in Latin music. But there was a reason for that. Most of us were not interested in Latin music before because we had lost, or we never had really, cultural consciousness. America's schools never quite equipped us to understand that we were Puerto Ricans and should be proud of it. There were a lot of other reasons for that. The Cuban influence had stopped after the revolution of 1959, so that our musicians really didn't have something to grasp onto. So we had a lack of Cuban music, we had a lack of cultural consciousness as a result of the American school system, and that produced a vacuum. And that vacuum was filled up by two essences, Black and Puerto Rican. Puerto Ricans began to look into Afro-American market for a lot of the rhythm. So we developed a new kind of a sound, and that sound was called Latin Boogaloo. And if you remember, I do from junior high school.
So answer me this question. How could a people, and I'm talking about Puerto Ricans, at the time Felipe is referring to, how could those people in search of a music culture be the people who helped Black Americans create hip hop? That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, I want to focus on this particular excerpt off of this video. This is a series that John Leguizamo did featuring the excellence of the Latino community around the United States. Now, this particular episode takes place in New York, and seated at the table is Aida Rodriguez, of course, John Leguizamo. Then you have Tony Touch, and you have Fat Joe. And the reason why I'm bringing this video up, or at least this portion of the video, is to highlight something Aida said. And this goes to the heart of the controversy and the problems that are existing between Black and Puerto Rican. So let's check out what Aida is saying right here.
More woke, if that's still okay. Latinos, Latinas, Latinx, whatever word you pick, we can all agree that our community is really making a mark.
So right now we're having a moment, a cultural moment, right?
Absolutely.
But I think collectively we have to support the efforts of others. I.e., for instance, in the Heights, right? Let's celebrate that moment. That
I was in that theater. I brought my whole family.
Or in Canto, that those movies are being seen, and let's all flock to theaters. Let's support the artists who made it happen.
It's a beautiful thing. You support your community. Yeah.
We're just getting the light shined on us right now, but we've been here, and you know what I make the practice of being able to celebrate us without having to bring anybody else down. Like, you know, because there's always this comparison thing when it comes to people of color. I do believe that we have gotten so divided, and that's white supremacy's work, right?
It's like a capitalist.
And this is what is going on with people, what Dr. Cologne is doing. He's engaging in division, trying to promote this 50-50 nonsense that Fat Joe brought on. And I think Aida is speaking to that, but not in a direct way, but an indirect way, because she's aware of what's going on. A lot of these Hispanics, in order to uplift themselves, they have to take jabs at Black America. All aboard the Cologne train. If misinformation is what you seek, you are on the right train. I have a message for those participants who offer their talents in Dr. Cologne's up-and-coming documentary on a Latin breakdown, or should I say, the fictitious Latin breakdown. My advice to you is get off while you can. You can save yourself the embarrassment when this documentary drops. I have already established that there is no such thing as the Latin breakdown. Don't be guilty by association. Don't associate yourself with a lie. Don't be on the wrong side of history. Don't let Puerto Rican pride override your sense of honesty and integrity. You certainly don't want to be on this train when it crashes.